Hi there! Today I'm going to teach you about different types of verbs. So what is a verb? A verb is one of the main parts of a sentence or question in English. In fact, you can't have a sentence or a question without a verb. That's how important these action parts of speech are. The verb signals an action, an occurrence, or a state of being. Whether mental, physical, or mechanical, verbs always express activity. Let's look at physical verbs. Here's a definition and some examples. Physical verbs are action verbs. They describe specific physical actions. If you can create a motion with your body or use a tool to complete an action, the word you describe is most likely a physical verb. Here are some physical verb examples. The physical verb examples in the following sentences are in bold for easy identification. Let's run to the corner and back. I hear the train coming. Call me when you've finished your class. Next are mental verbs. So these sound quite funny, but mental verbs have meanings that are related to concepts such as discovering, understanding, thinking or planning. In general, a mental verb refers to a cognitive state. Mental verb examples. I know the answer. She recognized me from across the room. Do you believe everything people tell you? States of being verbs. Also known as linking verbs, state of being verbs describe conditions or situations that exist. State of being verbs are inactive since no action is being performed. These verbs are usually complemented by adjectives. States of being verbs examples are: I am a student. We are circus performers. Please be quiet. Action verbs. Action verbs are verbs that express an action. For example, run, walk, do, and drive. I'll do my homework when I get home. Action verbs as transitive and intransitive verbs. Most action verbs are defined as transitive or intransitive. This means that some are used with a direct object, the person or thing that receives the action of the subject, and others don't need a direct object. Some verbs can be both transitive and intransitive, depending on their meaning. A transitive verb example: Joe will send the quote as soon as he can. An intransitive verb example: Many of the students are not well. They coughed throughout the lesson. Transitive verbs. Transitive verbs always receive a direct object. For example, Richard annoys his boss so much that he'll never get a promotion. His boss is the direct object of annoys, and a promotion is the direct object of get. Jenna brings Mrs. Smith lunch every day. Mrs. Smith is the direct object of brings, Jenna is the subject. Here's a list of some common transitive verbs that must be followed by a direct object. Please have a look. Intransitive verbs. Intransitive verbs don't need a direct object in order to complete their meaning. Many are followed by an adjective, adverb, preposition, or verb complement, gerund or infinitive. Here's a list of common intransitive verbs. Please have a look at the slide. Here are some examples. If Kathy continues to be late for work, the boss will fire her. Continues is followed by an infinitive, to be, with no direct object. The bomb exploded in the city centre. Exploded is followed by a preposition of place with no object. Next are auxiliary or helping verbs. Auxiliary or helping verbs are used with a main verb to show the verb's tense or to form a negative or question. The most common auxiliary verbs are have, be, and do. Does Sam write all his own reports? 2. The secretaries haven't written all the letters yet. 3. Terry is writing an email to a client at the moment. Auxiliary verbs, also known as helping verbs, add functional or grammatical meaning to the clauses in which they appear. They perform their functions in several different ways. By expressing the tense, they provide a time reference, for example, past, present, or future. Grammatical aspect, they express how verbs relate to the flow of time. Modality, they quantify verbs. Voice, they describe the relationship between the action expressed by the verb and the participants identified by the verb's subject, object, etc. They add emphasis to a sentence. Auxiliary verbs almost always appear with a main verb, and although there are only a few of them, they are among the most frequently occurring verbs in the English language. How to identify an auxiliary verb? You probably know that every sentence has at least one verb in it. There are two main types of verbs. Action verbs are used to depict adjectives that are doable, and linking verbs are used to describe conditions. Both action verbs and linking verbs can accompany auxiliary verbs, including the three main ones: do, be, and have. Sometimes actions or conditions occur only one time, and then they're over. It's at times like these that some of the same verbs that are used as auxiliary verbs are instead used as action or linking verbs. In this example, we see the word is. This is one of the most common auxiliary verbs, but because it is alone here, it does not function as an auxiliary verb. Jerry slammed the car door on his thumb. He is in pain. Is a linking verb in this sentence. Because it is alone, it is not an auxiliary verb. At other times, an action or condition is ongoing, happening predictably or occurring in relationship to other events or sets of events. In these cases, single-word verbs, like is, are not capable of accurately describing what happened, so phrases that include auxiliary verbs are used instead. These can be made up of anything from 2 to 4 words. A main verb, also known as a base verb, indicates the kind of action or condition that takes place. An auxiliary or helping verb accompanies the main verb and conveys other nuances that help the reader to gain specific insight into the event that's taking place. Read the following sentences and explanations to gain greater insight into how auxiliary verbs work. 1. Jerry caught his thumb in the car door as coffee spilt from his cup onto his favourite shirt. 2. Jerry is always spilling things. 3. Since Jerry is also accident-prone, he should have been drinking coffee from a mug with a lid, which would not have spilt on his favourite shirt. In sentence 1, caught and spilt single-word verbs describe quick, one-time actions of both Jerry and his messy coffee. This sentence does not contain an auxiliary verb. Since Jerry often has unfortunate accidents, is spilling communicates the frequency of his clumsy actions in sentence 2. In sentence 3, the auxiliary verbs that make up should have been drinking and would have stained express time relationships as well as an evaluation of Jerry's actions. 3 common auxiliary verbs. There are just 3 common auxiliary verbs: have, do, and be. In this section, we'll take a closer look at how these common verbs work, and you'll see some examples. Have. Have is a very important verb that can be on its own in all of the tenses it's used in, including has, have, having, had, hadn't, or had not. It's usually used to denote ownership, and it can also be used to discuss ability or to describe appearance. Have is also a very popular substitute for the verbs eat and drink. For example, let's have dinner. When used as an auxiliary verb, have is always teamed up with another verb to create a complete verb phrase, making it easy to differentiate between uses. You can see the difference in the sentences here. Jerry has a large coffee stain on his shirt. Has is an action verb here. Jerry has bought a new shirt to replace the one that was ruined earlier. Has is an auxiliary verb here. Bought is a past participle that completes the verb phrase. Jerry should have been more careful. Have again is an auxiliary verb here, and the phrase should have been expresses time and evaluates Jerry's actions. Do. Do can be used as an action verb that is on its own in all of the tenses it's used in, including to do, does, done, did, didn't, doesn't, or did not. When used as an auxiliary verb, do is always paired up with another verb to create a complete verb phrase. In some cases, it's used to add emphasis. I did put the rubbish out. Do is often used to form questions and negative clauses. It's also used in an elliptical sentence where the main verb is understood and is omitted as a result. For example, he plays the piano well, doesn't he? Or they all had dinner, but I didn't. Because he spills things so often, Jerry does more laundry than most people. Does is an action verb here. Jerry didn't put his coffee in a cup with a lid. Didn't is an auxiliary verb here. Jerry doesn't always spill things, but it happens a lot. Doesn't is also an auxiliary verb here. Be. Be or to be is an important verb that has a multitude of uses in English. It can be used as an action verb that's on its own in all of the tenses it's used in, including be, to be, been, am, are, is, was, were, wasn't, was not, aren't, are not, weren't, and were not. When used as an auxiliary verb, be is always paired with another verb to create a complete verb phrase. It can be singular or plural, present or past. Negative sentences are formed by adding the word not. Jerry is messy. Is an action verb here.